Welcome to Global Village Show today. We are very honored to have Dr. Michael from the University of Calgary. This is our first time we're airing from the city of Calgary. Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm currently an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Calgary. I teach in the Department of Political Science. I teach courses related to security, international relations, terrorism, which is my current area of study right now. I do a lot of research in terrorism, radicalization, counter-radicalization.
At the University of Calgary?
At the University of Calgary.
Okay. So when you talk about, and you teach political science?
Yes.
Okay. So what is a refugee? In worldwide dilemma, for example, refugee.
Right, so a very simple definition for how we define or understand what a refugee is. It's an individual who's fleeing a country, and the reason they're fleeing is based on a form of persecution or violence or war. So again, a simple contrast would be this is not individuals leaving by choice, emigrating to a new place. They are being forced to flee, and that's what a refugee is. And in the current sort of climate, the majority of refugees are coming predominantly from the Middle East and from Northern Africa. And this is not surprising in the sense that we tend to recognize that these parts of the world right now are facing some volatility. We recognize there are conflicts going on. There's a tremendous amount of persecution going on. And the reality is that this has been bubbling beneath the surface for a very long time. So when you talk about refugees fleeing Syria, the reality is that this is actually sort of the compounding of larger movements, with first individuals fleeing the fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and now Syria. So this is the tail end of years and years of this mass movement of people away from these conflicts. And basically now, of course, we're talking about how we in Canada and North America and Europe can try and alleviate some of this tension of the mass numbers of people that are trying to flee this type of persecution.
Following up that question, refugees running away from a problem.
Yes.
But if you read most of the media, also it could also have a security risk as well. Component.
Well, the security concern, of course, once again, is this conflation between these individuals who are fleeing these conflict zones and an association that they may be potentially a risk to security. Of course, in the context you're talking about ISIS or Al Qaeda, and whether or not ISIS and Al Qaeda are making efforts to hide people amongst the refugees to get them into Europe or North America. And again, what you have to recognize is that this movement of people has been going on for a very long time. And of course, the first stage is efforts to move locally. So you talk about Jordan, and you talk about Turkey, and you talk about Lebanon, and the fact that they have accepted large numbers of individuals, and they're pretty much at capacity. So again, this isn't something that sort of is just sprung upon us. This has been going on for several years, and the risk of the security risk posed. You will hear various reports of individuals who suggest that ISIS is managing to include people. I don't necessarily think that is a great risk at this point, personally.
So that's just a creation of some sort of a fear into public. Then it is not something fact. It's because these people are running away from their own lives to go somewhere safe.
Well, again, exactly. I mean, you have to think about these individuals who are simply fleeing a conflict zone and associate or identify them as people who want to live their lives, to work, to raise their kids, to get an education, which they're obviously unable to do in a country that is war torn or is suffering from conflict. And so this is essentially efforts to start over and rebuild a life for themselves.
And we have obligation to help.
We have an obligation to help where we can, absolutely.
Okay. Can you tell us about the importance of, for example, the different names that associated with ISIS, IS, Daesh?
Sure.
Is there any significance of changing the names?
There is some significance, and the significance essentially comes in the power or the legitimacy that you're going to afford this group. So what do I mean by this? ISIS, the simple acronym, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
And that, of course, describes the geographic area that they, of course, currently hold. There are various incarnations of that, such as ISIS with Islamic State in Iraq, al-Sham, and then ISIL, which is the Islamic State in the Islamic Levant. And these are sort of larger, more historical terms for the region before borders were created separating the country. So the region of the Levant stretches from Turkey all the way down through Iraq, Syria, Jordan, into the northern parts of Egypt. So again, just geographically explaining what this group is. Daesh is the acronym, the Arabic acronym for ISIS. It actually has a very negative connotation. So again, it's understood in that language in a slang sort of way as to trample over or to bully. So obviously, if you're a group, you do not want your name to be associated with this idea that you are a bully, despite the fact we're well aware that they obviously are. And the punishment actually for using the word Daesh in that territory is they will cut out your tongue.
Wow.
Yes. And then, of course, in some versions you hear just simply IS, the Islamic State. Once again, this is an effort by ISIS to try and gain some legitimacy by giving some sense of semblance to the idea that they are a state like Canada, which is obviously, again, not true. So, the different sort of names are simply a reflection of efforts to sort of control the message. So again, one can have negative connotations. Daesh, they obviously don't want to use that. We do. IS, the Islamic State, giving the appearance or legitimacy of a state, they want to use that and have us use that, and we don't want to. And again, from my perspective, I'm comfortable with the ISIS or the ISIL simply because it provides a very easy explanation to explain, where this group is. The Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and so there's no sort of illusions as to where this group is operating right now.
Okay, so you prefer using the ISIS or ISIL or IS?
Yes.
So
I would not use IS. I would not use IS and grant them that legitimacy. So I'm okay using ISIS because the latter part of in Iraq and Syria, denotes where they are operating. That's a sort of an accurate depiction of where they are right now.
Okay, so there is a difference between the ISIS and IS then?
Yes, because IS, simply Islamic State, full stop, gives the impression that they are a state. And when you talk about the idea of a state, that would give the appearance that you're giving them the same legitimacy as you would a regular state, such as a Canada or a France or whatever, which is absolutely not true, and we don't want to do that. That's what they want us to say, because the power of the words gives this impression that they are more than they are.
Oh, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I think then ISIS will be more practical because that's where they are at.
Exactly. It's a simple representation for everybody to understand. You don't need to understand a lot to recognize here is this group, and this is where they currently operate. Yes.
Because when you say Daesh, most of the people who live in the Western society don't even know what Daesh is.
Exactly. And the concern would be if you start using Daesh, that people will start to think that perhaps there's yet another group that has emerged. And so it's a question of just keeping things simple and straightforward.
Okay. What motivates people, especially young youth, to join ISIS or Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram?
Very, very difficult question. And the truth of the matter is we have some places that we can look. There are some indicators, but the most important thing to recognize is that every person is an individual, and each individual is motivated or impacted by these sort of these variables, so to speak, in different ways. So, for example, we look to a couple of things, such as perhaps the sense of belonging. So, individuals who feel alone. They feel isolated or marginalized. Maybe they don't have a lot of friends. And so again, the power of having a group of people who say to you, come join us, we love you, we accept you, can be very powerful. We recognize that some of these individuals are having what we call a crisis of identity. And again, if you think sort of in larger terms, lots of people at some point in their life basically have this crisis where they ask themselves, who am I? Where do I belong in this world? What am I doing here? And again, in some circumstances, if things happen to go negatively, perhaps the loss of a family member or the loss of a job or something like this, unfulfilled expectations, that perhaps opens a vulnerability where they can look for something to provide those answers. And if somebody comes along and provides those answers for you, that can be a very powerful experience as well. Unfulfilled expectations. One of the things that we're starting to look at right now is a sense again of people who are simply disillusioned with what their life is or where their life has gone. This belief growing up that you're going to take on the world and be successful and have a great job and get married, and then of course life's much more complicated than that, and sort of you feel this letdown. We don't have any good mechanism by which we can predict. So as I suggested to you, we recognize after the fact, when we look at individuals who have become radicalized and who have joined these groups or conducted plots or attacks, we often can find what we call that tipping point. So when you go back through their life and you're looking at their experiences, and you can usually find that, here is a place in their life where something has happened, which has perhaps opened up this, what we call a cognitive opening, where these ideas could have gained an entrance. But again, the difficult part with this is that lots and lots of people experience these crises of identities. Lots and lots of people suffer from some of these challenges, and not everybody, of course, becomes radicalized or pursues violence. So very individualistic. To put it in a different way, it is almost a perfect storm of factors, where somebody is vulnerable for days, for a week, for a month, we don't know, and they finally find something that helps them explain or helps them believe they understand who they are and what they're supposed to do. And one final point I should make is that when you talk about groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in particular, they're very good at what they do. They're very good in understanding how to relate to or speak to these vulnerable types of individuals. And again, in sort of reports and analyses and studies we've done, it's very clear that they're professional psychologists in that sense. They know exactly what to say to people to sort of start moving them towards the end goal that they're trying to attain.
And most of the time they use social media then?
Yeah, they use social media. Again, the fact that ISIS uses Twitter or has learned how to use Twitter is not necessarily the end all of this. It's their messaging, which is very, very effective. So the example I would give you, again, is individuals like Andre Poulain or John Maguire. So these are Canadian youth who have been radicalized and who traveled abroad. We believe that they are now deceased. But again, they are responsible for releasing videos and tapes where they're speaking directly to other Canadian youth. I was just like you. I played hockey. I drank Tim Hortons. And the term we use for this is homophily. When you hear a message from somebody, the credibility you can sort of apply to that individual or relate to them carries a lot of weight. So again, ISIS has been very, very strategic. They've been very clever in terms of how they have been doing their messaging. If they're speaking to people in Britain, they're using British citizens. If they're speaking to people in Australia, they're using an Australian citizen. Germany, et cetera, et cetera. Wow. So very, 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 very clever, well-designed messaging apparatus. The fact that they're able to reach a lot more people with social media, of course, is an added bonus.
Wow, they are good at social media.
They're very good at it.
So what's the link between homegrown terrorism and those who commit terrorism outside of Canada then?
Right, well for homegrown, what we're talking about as a definition is this general idea that these are individuals who are born and raised or who have lived extensively in a Western state, Western democratic state, who then become radicalized and then plot or conduct attacks against their own state. So that's sort of the definition of when we apply homegrown. What we recognize, of course, now, in addition to individuals who are becoming radicalized and then wanting to conduct attacks in their home state, they're also now traveling abroad to join ISIS in Iraq or in Syria. And so again, that's the relationship. It's a similar set of ideas. These groups are espousing a version, a set of ideas about what they think the world should look like.
Yeah.
And then basically individuals who receive that idea are then making decisions about what they want to do. So for example, the term used more readily in the North American context, Canada and the United States, and for a long time Europe, was what we would call these Islamist-inspired homegrown terrorists. And so these are individuals who adopt the ideas, but do not have any direct link to the group itself. So there's no command and control, there's no support, there's no funding, there's no training. These are individuals who like the ideas and then are going to act on their own behalf. What we've seen more recently in Europe with Paris and Brussels, this is a little bit of a different animal right now in the sense that these were actually individuals who were born and raised in Brussels, traveled to Iraq and Syria, were trained, were funded, and came back. So they were deployed by the group. So again, there is a difference we make, but that difference is starting to become a little more murky right now. So again, ISIS even acknowledges this in terms of taking responsibility. So for Brussels and Paris, they very clearly say, we did this. San Bernardino in California, we didn't do this, but we applaud the individuals who did.
Wow. But at the end of the day, the commonality between all is just committing a violence act.
Committing violence based on this set of ideas that this group espouses or spreads, yes.
The United States have introduced something called local partners to prevent violent extremism and etc.
Yes.
Do we have a national counter-radicalization strategy programs in Canada? If not, why?
Yes, we do not. This past budget came the announcement finally of the funding for a national counter-radicalization office. In this context, we are way behind our peers, the United States and Europe and places like that, who have been doing this a lot longer. Counter-radicalization, again, is very difficult to tease out. It requires the cooperation and investment of multiple actors or stakeholders, the community, religious leaders, police, intelligence agencies, academics, government at all levels. So it really requires a concerted effort by a lot of people to come together to start addressing this. What we have seen is we have seen some local initiatives that have been started in some places. So for example, here in Calgary, the Calgary Police have started the Redirect program. In Montreal, the city of Montreal, they as well have started a counter-radicalization office of their own. So what we have at this point are several sort of local initiatives, but they don't coordinate, they don't share information or best practices or anything of this nature. So in the sense of what Canada needs to be doing and what hopefully will develop, and again, they've announced a budget for this office, but we haven't heard anything since that, is that there will be some type of office that is overseeing and providing some support or continuity to these local initiatives. It has to be done locally. That is because the experiences of communities in different cities is very different. Calgary is not Montreal. Montreal is not Windsor, which is not Toronto, which is not Edmonton. So essentially, this is where you start to talk about who has to take the lead on these types of initiatives, and it has to be community leaders.
So each city can produce their own and then organize and oversee by the Office of the Counter.
Well, again, how exactly it turns out to be organized remains to be seen. But again, local communities with a sense of what's happening on the ground that can identify with individuals and individuals can identify with them, they have to take the lead. Government has to be there to support them and help them, but government cannot simply tell communities what to do and how to do it. That will not work. And at least we recognize that point.
It has to come from the grassroots.
Grassroots, bottom up, absolutely.
Okay. should people be afraid of anyone who is Muslim or anyone
No.
from the Middle East?
No, of course not. Again, a very simple distinction that you can make. Islam is a religion. These groups more readily subscribe to a definition of what you would call Islamism. It's an ideology. It's a social movement. It's a set of ideas about what the world should look like. So again, we make a clear distinction between that. So this is not about Islam. This is not about the religion. This is not about Muslims. This is about a very, very small percent of a percent of a percent of individuals who are adopting this twisted justification based on manipulated ideas within the religion that are using this to try and sort of change the way society is run.
Okay, just to gain for their own
Yes,
vision of.
Absolutely.
of-
They have a
yeah.
vision of what they want the world, what they want society to look like. And they use violence to pursue that. This is a social movement. This is about ideas. This is not religion. This is not the religion at all.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who is deceased now, who was the long-time ambassador in Geneva, called Yusuf Baribari. And he was the ambassador for the UN Security Human Rights Council in Geneva. And he flew to Mogadishu for some one-day
Yep.
visit, and he was killed by
Al-Shabaab.
Al-Shabaab. I spoke to him before he left, but that shows he was a very religious person himself.
Absolutely. But it is
Muslim,
not
pray.
their interpretation or understanding of religion. And he represents a threat to their vision because he's speaking out against what they are saying and what they are doing. And this is common. We recognize that more often than not, the majority of the victims of these groups, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, are Muslims. And these are Muslims who are standing up and disagreeing with the interpretation or vision of these ideas. And this political Islamism, this political Islam, has been around for a very long time in various forms. And this is also one of the things that we need to be very cautious about because this is not about groups. What I mean is that ISIS will be defeated. We will defeat ISIS. We will defeat Al-Qaeda. We will defeat Al-Shabaab. We will defeat Boko Haram. You have to focus on defeating the ideas, because defeating the group does not defeat the ideas. Another group will simply adopt these ideas and carry it forward. So essentially, this is about challenging the ideas about what that these groups are espousing or trying to sort of spread.
So we have to gain the mind and hearts of,
and minds.
Yeah,
Hearts and
of
minds.
the people.
Exactly. And again, when we talk about counter-radicalization, the emphasis has to be on the prevention aspect of it. Challenge these groups from various different perspectives to prevent their ideas from gaining any credibility.
In Canada, are we proactive in identifying and preventing efforts to radicalize our citizens then?
Well, again, we have a very rudimentary understanding of what this process looks like. We've talked about the reality that it's very individualistic. So lots of people see this group, hear this group, and immediately dismiss it for what it is. That's not the case for all individuals. So essentially what we're looking to do is we're looking to provide counter narratives. And what I mean by that is these groups are trying to sell these ideas, and we need to challenge these ideas. And that's what we have not been doing. So essentially we've allowed these groups to set the script or set the narrative about what this is about, why you should come and fight, why the West is evil or anti-Muslim or however you want to put it, and we have not said anything. And so what we have to do now is directly challenge these narratives. We have to do it from a religious standpoint in their efforts to manipulate the religious aspects. We have to challenge it from the sort of historical perspectives. And we have to challenge it from a real life perspective. These groups are telling young individuals that it's fun, this is a great way to live, come over here, it's an adventure, when the reality is it's the horrors of a war zone. So what we have to do is we have to educate people and give them a fair chance to make a decision for themselves. Are you going to be able to stop all of them from adopting the ideas? The answer is probably not, but you can do a tremendous amount you can mitigate it tremendously. And again, that allows us to focus on those that we're unable to deter and prevent them from actively traveling or conducting harm and not having growing numbers emerging.
One thing that I can share with you, doctor, is as a Muslim, I don't think you go to heaven by killing someone. That's for granted. That's absolutely not the case. So as you mentioned, I think that's just hijacking the religion to a different cause.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's they identify ways that they can convince people to pursue the end they want them to. And if that means I have to tell you one thing that's not true, well, that's what I'm going to tell you. And so again, this is where we talk about there are lots and lots of different ways and lots of different people who have a role in dealing with this challenge.
As a professor at the university, an expert on terrorism and political science, what would you like to see Canadian government in the next few years to do in terms of this 21st century problem?
I would like to finally see some movement on this Office of Counter-Radicalization. We've been talking about this for a very long time. And as I mentioned to you, the fact that we created this, we have not yet named somebody in charge of this. We haven't really laid out how it's going to work. So what do we need to do? We need to actually get moving on this. Because again, if you are to imagine radicalization, some people talk about it as a process like a conveyor belt or a staircase that you ascend, or a conveyor belt that you move along. Early intervention is key. The farther along you go in adopting these ideas, just like any ideas, the more concrete they become and the more difficult it is to change the conversation. So what we need to do is we need to focus on the prevention. If you want to argue that right now we need to be concerned about the reported 120 individuals who have traveled and might be a threat, well, that's a concern and we have to deal with that legislatively with laws and things like that. But we have to prevent that next generation from emerging. So if we're dealing with 120 now, we don't want to be dealing with 180 next year and then 300 the year after, et cetera, et cetera. We want to really shrink those numbers. And the other conversation we have to start having, which again, many Western states are, is this idea of disengagement. What do we do now with individuals who have adopted these ideas and now want to turn away from them? How do we sort of move towards reintegrating them potentially into society? And again, we use the term disengagement and not de-radicalization because we've already talked about the fact it's very individual. We don't exactly know how it works to get there, so we don't really know how it would work to get people back. And it's also quite a big deal to ask somebody to change their fundamental ideas about something. So there are lots of challenges moving forward. And again, it has to be a cooperative, coordinated effort between all of these different stakeholders, but of course government has at their disposal the money. So government has to be active in supporting and coordinating and helping to sort of spread sort of best practices. But at the same time, they have to be hands-off and allow communities to do things the way that they feel things are going to work best.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael, for taking the time from the university and joining us, and we are very honored to have you, and we hope they will be listening for the common good of all Canadians and they will act upon the advice.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is the end of Global Village. This is where the East meets with the West. We are very honored to have Dr. Michael today. Until then, take care and God bless you.